Hello everyone, and welcome to Coming Home Connection's annual benefit of Dia de los Muertos. I'm JoDee Powers, the Executive Director of Coming Home Connection, and I'm delighted you could join us today in helping us celebrate those who have been our caregivers and those who have passed in our care over the last year. Though we are really sad to not have this event in person once again because of COVID, we have a great lineup for you of entertainment and events that I hope you'll really enjoy over the next 30 minutes. This year we have Chef Sean Sinclair, who is the chef at the Legal Tender in Lamy. He's going to be preparing one of his favorite family meals. He's going to put together a roasted chicken, polenta, and a succotash, and he really likes using local ingredients. So I hope that you will take a pencil and paper and take some notes and create this meal for yourself. I don't want you to miss another local favorite, La Emmy, who brings passion and art to flamenco dance and music. And stay tuned for Joe Hayes, one of my favorite people who's a New Mexico storyteller. He's going to be delighting us with the tales of Pedro and Diablo and Caught on a Nail. In the event you're not familiar with Coming Home Connection and what we do, we provide in-home health services to those families in need in the Santa Fe area. In-home care can range from companionship, running errands, cooking light meals, and caregiving at all levels. We have a medical equipment lending program that allows you to come into our facility and get a walker, a scooter, a wheelchair, and use it and then bring it back if you need it, and we also take donation of these items. Coming Home Connection also has a navigation program, and this is where our health navigator works with area residents to figure out which services that they might need, whether that's Medicaid or SNAP or housing or some kind of Social Security benefit, to be connected with the services that maybe they're not getting, but we can help them connect to. Though COVID seems like it will never be over, we are still relying on people like you to help us get through these times. Your donation makes such a difference to us, and I hope that you will go to cominghomeconnection.org and make a donation today. Just click on the donate button, and no matter how small the donation, it really does help us. I also would like you to reach out to a friend and challenge them to match your donation. We have a goal of about $5,000 this year, and I hope that you'll make a donation and help us to reach that goal. I'd also like to thank our sponsors this year who helped us put this together. Coca-Cola of Santa Fe, Mexico Lindo, who's let us use this beautiful space. I'd like to thank Henry Lopez with the Santa Fe New Mexican, Joe Hayes, the storyteller, La Emme for her dancing, and Chef Sean Sinclair. I'd like to thank you all. Please make a contribution and enjoy what we've got to offer today.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Very good, Janet.
It's good to see you.
Yes.
Hey, we've got this fundraiser again this year.
Yes, we're excited to invite everyone out this time.
And we hope that you're going to be able to figure out how to put some money in there for us. We've been working hard this year. We've had lots of people that we've been helping, and we're hoping we can keep up the good work we've been doing the past several years.
We're sorry once again we can't do this in person, but virtually we hope you'll help us and help us with funding. Go to the website. I'm Jeff Sand. I'm the board treasurer of Coming Home Connection.
And I'm Janet Swinton. I am the president of the board this year. So it's a pleasure to see all of you out there, and thank you for helping us out. We think we've got a good organization going here, and we want to keep up the good work we've been working on.
Thanks so much.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Hi, I'm Joe Hayes. I'm a storyteller. I like to tell old stories from right around here in New Mexico. I have a story about two men way back in the old days who were good friends. The one man's name was Pedro. The other man, I don't know his name. No one ever called him by his name. They called him by a nickname. When he was only maybe 7 or 8 years old, everyone started calling him El Diablo, the devil, because he was so mischievous. He was always causing trouble. In school, if there was a trick being played on the teacher, you could bet El Diablo was the one who thought it up. He'd get all of the boys involved, and then they'd get caught, and they'd all get in trouble. All of them except for El Diablo. He always had some way to get off without any consequences. So most of the boys got smart and they stayed away from El Diablo. But not his good friend Pedro. Up through elementary school, on up through high school, even when they were grown men and they should have known better, it was still happening. El Diablo would drag his friend into trouble. For example, there was one time when El Diablo said to his friend, "Oye, Pedro, did you notice the apples on old man Martinez's tree this year? They really look good. Let's go steal some tonight. There's no moon. No one will see us." Pedro said, "Oh no, old man Martinez has that big dog. He'll bite my leg off. I'm not going to go over there." But El Diablo told him, "You don't have to worry about the dog. He keeps him inside at night. Come on, let's go get some apples." He talked his friend into it. So that night they got a big gunny sack and they went over there to old man Martinez's house. Sure enough, the dog was inside. They crept into the yard. They started picking apples from the tree. They filled the big gunny sack with apples. Then they crept back out of the yard, and Pedro said, "We'll have to find some place to divide these apples up." Of course, El Diablo had a great idea. He said, "I know. We'll go to the Campo Santo, to the graveyard. No one will bother us at the cemetery." So they went down the road until they came to the cemetery. They went in through the gate. There was a low adobe wall around that graveyard. They walked along the wall until they found a shadowy place right next to the wall. They sat down and they dumped out all of the apples and they started to divide them into two piles. As they divided the apples, they would say, "One for Pedro, one for Diablo, one for Pedro, one for Diablo." Well, it just so happened that a couple of men from the village had been out living it up that night. They had been dancing and celebrating and drinking a little bit too much. In fact, they had so much to drink, they couldn't make it back home. They had fallen asleep leaning against the wall right across from where Pedro and El Diablo were dividing up the apples. One of those men was a big, round, fat fellow. The other one was old and skinny and sort of withered up looking. About 5 minutes later, the skinny man woke up from the other side of the wall, over there in the graveyard. He heard a voice saying, "One for Pedro, one for Diablo, one for Pedro, one for Diablo." "Ay, Dios mío," he said, "San Pedro y el Diablo están repartiendo las almas muertas en el Campo Santo." "Oh, my Lord," he said, "St. Peter and the devil are dividing up the dead souls over there in the graveyard. One for Pedro, one for Diablo, one for Pedro, one for Diablo." He woke his friend up. His friend's mouth fell wide open. They sat there staring at each other, too frightened to speak. And the voice kept going, "One for Pedro, one for Diablo, one for Pedro, one for Diablo." Until finally Pedro and El Diablo got to the bottom of the pile of apples. And then they heard El Diablo say, "Well, Pedro, that's all of them." But Pedro happened to notice two more apples that had rolled right over by the wall. One of them was a nice, round, fat apple. The other one wasn't very good. It was sort of withered up. And they heard Pedro say, "No, Diablo, there's still two more. Don't you see those two right there by the wall? The big fat one and the withered up one?" The hair stood up on the back of their necks. They thought they were the ones being talked about. They listened to what would be said next, and they heard El Diablo say, "Well, Pedro, you can take the fat one. I'll take the withered up one." And then they heard Pedro say, "No, Diablo, neither one looks very good. You go ahead, take them both." When the two men heard that, they thought the devil would come over the wall any second to get them. They sobered up in a hurry. They jumped up on their feet and ran down the road as fast as they could. They went home and slammed the door and locked it. And they say those two men stayed home every night from that day on. And they never drank another drop of whiskey for the rest of their lives.
Hello, my name is GLENYS and I'm the founder of Coming Home Connection. Coming Home has been providing quality in-home care since before 2007. I hope you will make a contribution today and help Coming Home continue its good work.
En la puerta corre yo mi alma, tú me has citado, tú me has citado, y en la puerta corre yo, tú me has citado, y en la puerta corre yo, tú me has citado, tú me has citado, a ir a la lumbrera, por los calados, a ir a la lumbrera, por los calados. Y tú te empeñas en ir a ver la muda, y tú te empeñas en ir a ver la muda de ella. Asoma la ventana, mi alma de realito, asoma la ventana, realito, asoma la ventana, de realito.
Kate Russell, self-employed photographer based here in Santa Fe. Hi, yeah, I met Coming Home Connections in May of 2020. Both of my parents were in the middle of big health and life changes, and I needed to help. They helped me create a care plan and system for both of my parents. My dad is an advanced Parkinson's guy, and my mom went through a lot of medical adventures. I don't know how you call it now. But either way, their needs changed dramatically, and it was way more than I could take on. So with Coming Home Connections, I get support with just keeping track, logbooks, medicine as needed. They help, we help strategize that. They give my parents general care support, help them move around the house, go on walks, stimulate, take them to classes. My dad is a part of the Rocksteady boxing group. Can't really do that without Tashi or Celia, and that's really helpful. So the whole thing has really made things a lot more manageable and stable, and I couldn't have done it without the whole crew at Coming Home. Because of Coming Home Connection, I was able to turn a job layoff back into a pretty solid freelance business again. I was able to go back to work, and I wouldn't have been able to do that without their support.
Hello, it's me again, Joe Hayes. I have another story. This happened a long time ago in a little village up in the mountains right here in New Mexico. There was a girl who lived in that village who must have been very pretty, because 3 young men in the same village all fell in love with that girl. She wasn't interested in any of those young men. They just about drove her crazy, always trying to get her attention. Almost every evening, one of them would show up at her house and stand outside and sing love songs to her. Sometimes 2 of them would come on the same evening. Sometimes all 3 would come on the same evening. They would sound like a bunch of alley cats out there, each one trying to be the loudest and the most heartbroken with his song. In the daytime, they would come racing past her house on fast horses, trying to impress her. Every time she walked through the town, one of those men would come up to her and try to hand her a flower or start a conversation with her. No matter how much she told them that she wasn't interested, or came right out and said she didn't even like them, they wouldn't leave her alone. She decided to teach them a lesson. She went to the carpenter in the little village. She said to the carpenter, ¿Cuánto me vas a cobrar para hacer un ataúd, un cajón para un muerto? How much will you charge me, she said, to make a coffin? He told her how much he would normally charge. She said she would pay him twice that much if he would build a coffin without telling anybody about it, and then take it out to the old empty house at the edge of the village. Everyone knew that old house. Everybody said, es una casa donde penan. Hay un ánima que anda penando en esa casa. Es una casa embrujada. That's a haunted house. There's a soul suffering in that old house. Well, it was all agreed upon. And then the next time the girl was walking through the town, one of those men came up to her to start a conversation, and she said to him, you know that old empty house out at the edge of the village? If you go to that house at 11:30 tonight, you will see a coffin in the house and a candle burning at the head of the coffin. And if you're brave enough to climb into that coffin and cover your face like a dead man and lie there all night long, I might like to get to know you a little bit better. He was so delighted. Finally, she was paying some attention to him. He said he wasn't afraid to do that. And then a little while later, the second young man approached her. She said, "You know that old empty house out there at the edge of the village? If you go to that house at 15 minutes before midnight tonight, you'll see a coffin in the house and a dead man lying in the coffin. And if you're brave enough to pull a chair over beside that coffin and sit and pray over that dead body all night long, I might like to get to know you a little bit better." He was happy too, and he said he was going to do it. And then, of course, it wasn't long before the third young man spoke to her. She said, "You know that house at the edge of the village? If you go to that house at midnight tonight, you will see a coffin in the house and a dead man lying in the coffin. And there's another ghost that sits and prays over that dead man all night long. And if you're brave enough to dress yourself up like the devil, with cow horns tied on your head and your face all covered with charcoal, and you dance around those two ghosts all night long, I would enjoy the pleasure of your company." He said he was going to do it too. So a little before 11:30 that night, the girl went to the house. The carpenter had kept his word. There was an empty coffin in the house. She lit a candle and put it at the head of the coffin, and she went into a back room to hide and see what would happen. At 11:30, she saw the first young man arrive. She saw him trembling as he climbed into the coffin. Then he lay back, he covered his face with a cloth, he folded his arms over his chest, he lay there perfectly still. 15 minutes later, the second young man arrived. He found a chair and dragged it over beside the coffin, and he sat there and he started to pray. She could hear his voice quivering as he was praying. She heard the rosary beads rattling in his fingers. And then just at midnight, the one who was praying happened to glance at the door. He said, "Ay, Dios mío, es el Diablo." "Oh, my Lord," he said, "it's the devil." And when the young man who was lying in the coffin heard that, he came jumping up out of the coffin. He said to the devil, "You're not going to get me yet." And he jumped out a window and he ran away down the road. But when the young man who was dressed like the devil saw what he thought was a dead man come jumping up out of a coffin and then go diving out a window, he was so scared that he spun around and he ran down the road right behind him. The two of them ran down the road with the dead man saying, "No, no," and the devil right behind him at every step he took. But the one who was praying, he didn't stop praying. He didn't get out of the chair. He sat there praying louder and louder and louder. The girl was impressed with him. She came out of her hiding place. She said to him, "Tú sí eres valiente. You really are brave," she said. "Tú no corriste. You didn't run away." The young man turned his white face toward her. He said, "¿Cómo quieres que corra? How do you expect me to run?" he said. "Se me engancharon los pantalones en un clavo. My pants are stuck on a nail," he said. But just then the nail popped out of the chair. He fell to the floor face first, and then he jumped up and he ran down the road after the other two. And the next day, the girl told all of her friends what had happened. Her friends told their families. Before long, it spread all over the village. And those 3 young men were so embarrassed, they never bothered her again. And they say that even today, in that village, if somebody does something that seems like it took a lot of courage and they start to brag about how brave they are, people will say to them, "Oh, maybe you're brave, or maybe your pants just got caught on a nail."
My name is Carolyn Fitzgerald, and I'm a fairly new transplant to Santa Fe, New Mexico. I came here often to visit my mom, who moved out here and stayed until she passed away at the ripe old age of 105. And we had the opportunity to work with caregivers during the last 3 or 4 years that she was here. And that opportunity that we took gave me the impetus to try and give back when I moved here. And I've had the ability and the grace to be with Coming Home Connection, and I just can't thank them enough for all they've done for me since I've been with them, and for what they have done for their community. And I hope you'll consider giving to their organization for all the good they do. It's a well worth project. And so please look into your heart and do what you're able to do. Thank you.
Hello everyone, my name is Sean Sinclair and I'm the executive chef and owner of Bar Castañeda, as well as the executive chef of the new legal tender in Lamy, New Mexico. Today we're going to roast the chicken. So let's start with the chicken. This one in particular is from Lotus Farms in Tijeras, New Mexico. It's a locally raised free-range chicken. I find that if you're going to put chicken as the star of the show, buy the best chicken that you can find. The Lotus Farm folks have a stand at the Santa Fe Farmers Market every Saturday, and you can find them there and get one of these exact birds for yourself to cook at home. We're going to start by trussing the chicken. I've done a little bit of prep work. These chickens from the farm, they come with a neck on them, so we've cut the neck off. One thing I really like to do is to remove the wishbone. It helps carve the chicken. It doesn't, that's where the wishbone's on your way when you're trying to cut the chicken up. So I start by just making 2 cuts and then follow the wishbone up. There's one of the halves. Okay. Wishbone's out. Also take the wing tips and kind of tuck them under the bird so the chicken sits nice and proud. Here I've got about 4 feet of twine. I find it's easier to start with a little too much than it is to not have enough. So I'll lay the chicken out and cross the twine. And as I come down from the cross, come down and trap the legs. I like to come down the thighs so I don't leave any marks on the breast when you're cooking the bird itself. And then when you come up to the front here, I like to wrap 3 times, because this is a self-cinching setup. That way it stays tight when you go to tie it. This chicken has been brined. You can use any brine recipe you like, but I use a little bit of brown sugar, salt, water, mustard seed, and some fresh herbs like thyme, parsley, chives, and rosemary. So as you can see now, the chicken's nice and trussed. We're just going to season this with salt and pepper, and then we'll go over the oven to cook it. Yeah, so I like to start with a heavily seasoned broth, or not broth, a brine. So usually it's like 2 quarts of water, a 1.5 cups of salt, 2 cups of brown sugar, and then you kind of bring that to a boil. And then I also like to add, this is kind of a technique by weight that I do. I take I take ice, and after the brine, the super flavorful brine has been made, I add ice to it, and that dilutes it to the right level, but it also cools it down and allows me to use it right away. So I don't have to sit and wait for my brine to cool. The bird brines for 24 hours. You don't want to over brine it. It could go as little as 12 hours, but I like a full soak for the bird. So now we're going to roast the bird. I like to do mine in the convection oven. If you don't have a convection oven, that's okay. You'll want to set your oven a little higher than this, and we can talk about that in just a moment. But if you do have a convection oven, put it on high fan, 375 degrees. And the bird is going to, I can't give you an exact time because I don't know the weight of your bird. You'll need a thermometer. They're very handy tools in the kitchen to make sure that the bird is properly cooked but not overcooked. We're going to start the timer at 28 minutes and check it. It'll probably need another 12 or 14 minutes. I know that this is a pretty large bird, so it may take up to 40 minutes to cook, but we're going to monitor the temperature on the way. Chicken today, we're going to serve cooked some polenta. So in this pan, I've got 4 tablespoons of butter. I've got 3 cloves of garlic minced, 2 whole shallots minced. We're just going to give that a sweat with a pint of milk, a pint of heavily reduced and fortified chicken stock, and then here we have another local product. This is Tamaya Unicorn Polenta. It's a really wonderful product from one of the pueblos here in New Mexico. It's really some of the best polenta I've ever worked with in my career. It is very coarsely ground, and it does take some extra time to cook. You don't want to cook this aggressively. You want this on very low heat. First, let the liquids come up to a simmer. Turn them down to where there's no movement in the pan, and then add the polenta. It can take up to 35 minutes to cook. Just keep an eye on it and consistently stir. And then at the end, we're going to season it with salt, pepper, and a little bit of mascarpone cheese for added creaminess. While the polenta is cooking away, we're going to go ahead and start some corn succotash. We're here in early October, and we're just getting the last shipments of fresh corn raised here, grown here in New Mexico from the farmers. A lot of them aren't even bringing their corn to the farmers market; they're just selling it off to the restaurants. And for me, this is like a really coveted time of the year. I buy all the corn that I can get because I just love, squeezing the rest of the summer and cooking with fall ingredients kind of at the same time. Corn is such a lovely product when it's sweet, fresh, and delicious. So here we've got 4 tablespoons of butter in a cast iron skillet. These are called French pans. I like them a lot. We've got some garlic minced, shallot minced, a bit of jalapeno. Just give that a quick sweat. The aromatics are nice and sweated, and then we've removed the corn from the cob. We very carefully remove all the extra bits and strings. There's one stray piece that got in there. We even go as far to scrub the corn down with water and a toothbrush to make sure we get all the hairs out. Now the corn will pop and crack at you, but a little bit of toast on this corn is a good thing. I'm going to let it cook down for just a little while. Then I'm going to season it with salt, pepper, a little bit of sugar, and a little touch of lemon vinegar. It adds a nice brightness to the corn. The corn is so naturally sweet. Adding a little bit of acid works really well. It's almost an elote style. You can use lime juice. You can use a red wine vinegar. I really like this Farrell's lemon vinegar by the Noble Vinegar Company. It's just yummy, so that's what we're going to use. Coming Home Connection is a nonprofit that connects people in need of in-home care with volunteers. They've been doing it since 2007, and today we're supporting their annual celebration and fundraiser. Please give generously for those in need. There will be a link in the video to get in touch with Coming Home Connection. We're here in the bottle shop at the Castaneda Hotel. Please come and check us out. It's a wonderful little space where we support a ton of local breweries and have a wonderful selection of wine. Speaking of wine, I have a couple suggested pairings for your roasted chicken dinner. You know, roasted chicken is one of those things that I just suggest drinking what you like to drink with it. My favorites are from the Burgundy region. We have a Chardonnay and a Pinot Noir, but I also really like sparkling wine with roasted or fried chicken. So here we have a Sea Smoke Sea Spray from California. It's a wonderful sparkling wine, and it goes really well with the corn and the roasted chicken.
Hi, I'm JoDee Powers, and I'd like to introduce one of our caregivers.
Priscilla Martinez,
And Priscilla, how long have you been with Coming Home Connection?
going on 5 years.
What do you love about working for us?
I love everything about it. They've actually saved my life. I'm happy. I've maintained a great friendship with the company and with my clients. I'm happy being with Coming Home Connections.
And you do caregiving for us, right?
I'm a caregiver and I work hospice, so I do both. Right now at this time I have 2 clients. One is 100 years old. Yes, and she is a bullet, and I have another client that's 78. I've lost many clients and I've gained many. It's a learning experience every day with Coming Home Connections.
Well, thank you for being with us today.